Each day within the United States, there are over 1.2 million shipments of hazardous materials, or hazmat. A wide variety of flammables, corrosives, and toxic materials are packaged and transported by tank trucks, rail cars, aircraft, and container vessels. Hazardous materials account for over 28% of all freight tonnage shipped on our waterways each year. And there's over 2.3 million miles of gas and liquid pipeline that wind through our metropolitan, urban, and rural settings. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, every year, over 3.1 billion tons of hazmat shipments travel through densely populated areas of our nation and through your jurisdictions. Most shipments arrive at their final destination safely and without incident. But incidents will occur, and the time and place will be as unknown to you as the type of transport vehicle involved and the properties of the hazardous material it'll be transporting. Your safe and swift corrective actions can limit or prevent harm to people, property, the environment, and yourself. Failure to respond correctly could be catastrophic.
The Emergency Response Guidebook, or ERG, is your key resource for guidance to the safest approach and response in the initial phase of an incident where every minute can influence the outcome. This video presentation is for responders who are either unfamiliar with the ERG or are looking to learn more about the basics of using the guidebook. The video instruction will familiarize you with the contents of the ERG as well as how to navigate its pages. It's important to note that viewing this DVD is not a substitute for personal, hands-on learning that will enable you to become proficient at accessing what you will need in an emergency. The ERG will help you interpret information about an unknown material, its potential behavior, and the appropriate actions to take in an emergency. It is your responsibility as a first responder to protect yourself and the public during the initial phase of an incident. Your knowledge of the guidebook before going into a hazmat incident can save lives. The Department of Transportation is responsible for the safe and secure transportation of hazardous materials. The ERG encapsulates all the hazard identification communication links that are required by law. It is the responsibility of the manufacturers, shippers, and transporters to use a system of labels, placards, markings, and shipping papers on all materials and transport vehicles. OSHA standards provide that the first line of hazard communication and responsibility begins with the producer of the product. All manufacturers must communicate the hazards of the product they create. Most often, this information comes in the form of a materials safety data sheet. The manufacturer is obligated to ensure the safe management of the product for the duration of its existence, from cradle to grave. The shipper of the product is required to provide a shipping document based on Department of Transportation standards, an emergency response telephone number that is monitored at all times the hazardous material is in transportation, a hazard class or division number, a 4-digit ID number, and a shipping name. And finally, the transporter is the steward for the safe movement of the material. They're required to provide you with the proper shipping paper, as well as to ensure that the transport vehicle displays the accurate placard for hazardous material. In some cases involving international intermodal containers, an orange panel for material identification may be present, with or without a placard. Your correct usage of the ERG is the final, most vital link in this interdependent framework. Before we discuss how the ERG is organized, let's give some context to the use of the ERG. Let's talk about some real possibilities that exist for you when approaching an unknown hazardous materials scene. In Ludwig Benner's General Hazardous Materials Behavior Model, a container of material is stressed in three ways: thermally, mechanically, or chemically. When stressed, it most likely will breach and release its contents, engulfing anything in its pathway. Never underestimate the possibilities when dealing with chemical reactions. In this instance, the letter P next to the guide number would have informed you that the product may polymerize if subjected to high heat or if contaminated. According to Benner's model, risk assessment must begin at a distance. When arriving at a hazmat incident, your first responsibility is to keep yourself and the public safe. Resist rushing in. Position yourself upwind, uphill, or upstream from the hazard, and stay clear of all vapors, fumes, smoke, and spills.
On the day when you're called to the next hazardous material accident, the goal is that you're ready. Understanding the content and the organization layout of the ERG is where we'll begin. All the information you need on how and when to use the Emergency Response Guidebook can be found in the opening white pages. Anytime you look up a hazardous material in the ERG, you'll begin with either the yellow or blue pages. Those pages will guide you directly to the center of the book where the orange guides are located. The orange section is ultimately where you want to end up in the ERG. It contains the information you need in order to respond. If you find the 4-digit ID number first from the placard or from the shipping document, then you'll go to the yellow pages and look up that number numerically. The orange guide number will be in the column beside it. In this case, Guide 128 will give you the information that you need. If you find the name of the material first, which can be found on package markings or on the shipping paper, then you'll go to the blue pages and look up that name alphabetically. And again, we see that it leads us to Orange Guide 128. It's important to read the full name of the material. For example, if you were to look up arsenic, you'd need to know whether it's arsenic bromide, arsenic chloride, or another arsenic variation. This will keep you from going to the incorrect guide. The orange guides are the core of the Emergency Response Guidebook. In the orange guides, you'll find three major areas: potential hazards, public safety, and emergency response. Each guide is for a group of materials with similar chemical and toxicological characteristics. The key to using the ERG is applying the data points we'll be discussing to get you to this orange section. Once you have the proper guide for the material you're confronted with, then you'll have corrective actions to put into effect until qualified personnel can arrive and assist you.
In the crucial moments when the identification of the material is completely unknown, you could be the only responder on a scene for an extended period of time. You will need to use any and all available visual identification clues to safely approach the scene. Again, risk assessment must begin at a distance. In the very best case scenario, upon arriving on an incident, you will have the shipping paper available to you with the necessary pieces of information you need to react immediately and decisively. Most often, there will be only parts of information available depending upon the nature of the incident. The appearance of colored smoke, a vapor cloud, or people who collapse with no apparent cause may be your very first clue to the presence of hazardous materials.